everyone, welcome back to Relax with Animal Facts. I am Steph Wolf, and today I'm going to be learning with you about our furry, scaly, or possibly even slimy friends. And in today's case, it is definitely going to be a friend of the scaly sort of variety, maybe a bit slimy, I think mostly scaly. And that is because we are covering the oh so wonderful Chameleon. So this is a special listener episode dedicated to Maddie, who wrote in via Instagram. For those of you that want to have your animal on the podcast, you can either write into the show through Instagram by following Relax with Animal Facts and sending me a direct message, or you could always do it the old-fashioned way through email at relaxwithanimalfacts@gmail.com, and I respond to each and every one of you. I love reading your fan mail and your messages. It makes doing this podcast just so wonderful and so fun for me, and I guess for you guys too. Now, before we get into the show, I just want to remind you guys that if you are listening to the show, if you enjoy the show, go ahead and follow it. If you're on Spotify, leave a rating or a review. Those things like that really help the show grow and expand the podcast family together and allows more people to relax with us, with all of the rest of us, with some animal facts. So thank you so much for your continued support. I absolutely love doing the show because of all of you guys, and learning about animals. It's just super cool. It's a win-win for everyone involved, I guess. So a quick disclaimer before we get into the show that I am not an authority in any way when it comes to animals. I'm not an expert. I'm not an animal biologist, nothing like that. I am just a guy that loves to learn about animals and wants to help each and every one of you relax along with me as we learn about them. So when I say I'm learning with you, I really mean it. So before we get into the show, let's just all take a second to tune into our bodies for a second and realize maybe, where have we been carrying some tension? Maybe it's in your neck, your shoulders, maybe it's in your legs. Who knows? Except for you, of course. I don't know. For me, it is usually in my head and in my shoulders. So let's all take a second to relax those parts of our bodies that are tense as we prepare to go into an immersive experience to learn about the chameleon in some of the different habitats that they live in, but we're going to be focusing today on the rainforest. So let's go into the rainforest and learn together about the chameleon. I got my facts from thoughtco.com, mentalfloss.com, and nationalgeographic.com. This might be a slightly longer episode because there are just so many cool facts to go through. I usually like to cut down some of the facts that I think maybe are not as interesting or not as important so we can get to that 30-minute sort of time frame. But here, the chameleon is just so cool. Maddie, thank you again for your suggestion, that I had a hard time cutting down on the facts. So bear with me here. You're going to get a little bit of a longer episode today, which is good with me. I hope it's good with each of you. So, according to the Integrated Taxonomic Information System, that's the ITIS, there are 171 species in total of chameleons. With so many different species is gonna come different sizes. And sometimes not even just sizes. When you have this many species of a certain kind of animal, you can see differences not only in size, but it could be also in terms of diet. It could be behavioral things. It could be things like that, right? Mating rituals, stuff like that. So it is always super cool to see animals that have such a wide range of species, just so we can demonstrate the sheer difference in size that can happen within within an animal of its different species would be the Parsons chameleon, which is the largest chameleon, and according to the Encyclopedia Britannica, can grow up to 27 inches, 69.5 centimeters, for those of you that like centimeters, long. While from Madagascar, the Austelet, that is an interesting name, the Austelet chameleon is also very large and can grow up to 23 inches or 60 centimeters long. So these are fairly big lizards here. Now, in sharp contrast to the smallest chameleon which has ever been discovered, it has a special distinction. It is also one of the smallest vertebrates ever discovered. The leaf chameleon, which is a great name for it, grows just up to about half an inch or 16 millimeters and can sit comfortably on the head of a match. So here we see that within different species of the same animal, these are all chameleons, we see just how much of a difference habitat, location, their geolocation matters, right? Because in some places, being large might be good. In some places, being smaller might be good. And these adaptations is what helps the chameleon survive, and especially these 171 species of chameleons survive. Now, when you think about chameleons, I would imagine that you think about maybe how they change their color. That's definitely one of the things that I think of. Changing skin color is an important part of communication among chameleons, not just camouflage. According to the San Diego Zoo, a chameleon's skin changes colors in response to its emotions, such as anger or fear, changes in light, temperature, or even humidity. The brighter the color, the more dominant this male is going to be, and the more attractive he is to females as well. So these colors can play a part in interpersonal competition between males to win females. A submissive male is usually going to be brown or gray, and females will use their colors to accept or reject a suitor, and their color can also indicate that she is pregnant as well. So this is very amazing because, I always like to relate things back to us humans, right? But in this case, it can be a little bit challenging. While we do have changes in skin color, for example, maybe different biological processes such as inflammation, swelling, bruising, contusions, things like that, can cause a difference in skin color. But it's not so much a thing that, first of all, is voluntary. It is mostly, these are autonomic responses, meaning that they are responses from our body that are out of our conscious control, right? To look at your hand and make it be more red by filling it with more blood would be a very amazing thing to be able to do, but as far as I know, the majority of people can't do that. But this is super important in the chameleon world. Colors tell a lot, from emotion to even reproductive, health or reproductive suitability between mates. What I'm wondering now is if, just like human beings, we have color blindness, right? We have different kinds of color blindness in humans. I am wondering if chameleons ever are born colorblind. If that has ever happened before, it would be probably hard to tell. I imagine if chameleons were born colorblind, they wouldn't survive or mate very well. So maybe even if there were from a mutation of some kind born to be colorblind, I guess we wouldn't really know. It would be sort of an off chance, and we would have to be very lucky to discover it. But that's just a thought that I had. A new study has found that chameleons can very rapidly change their colors by adjusting special cells known as iridophore cells, which are in each layer of the skin. The chameleons can change the structural arrangement of the upper cell layer by relaxing or exciting the skin, which will lead to this change in color, researchers found. So from what I'm gathering here is that chameleons do this not as an autonomic response, but as something that is voluntary, in their control, being able to relax and excite the skin and consciously change the structural arrangement of cell layers, which is very, very fascinating to me. Most chameleons have what is called a prehensile tail, and we'll define that in a second for you. They will use this prehensile tail to wrap around tree branches. Their hands and their feet have large toes that will help them also cling to these branches. So let's talk about prehensile. That is just a super fancy word that means being able to cling or grab onto things. So this is seen in many different sorts of primates, depending on if you're looking at New World monkeys or Old World monkeys. Prehensile just means that they can grab stuff. So with their tail, they can use it almost as a fifth appendage to be able to really stabilize themselves on those branches. So that is fantastic. Now, besides changing skin color, chameleons have another feature that no other animals have. Their eyes move independently of each other, which will enable them to look in two separate directions at one time. This gives chameleons a full 360-degree view, and they can focus their eyes quickly and enlarge what they are looking at, like a camera lens. Now, this is simply amazing. If we could imagine that human beings have not only a 360-degree view, but that we can zoom like our iPhones or like cameras, that we'll be able to zoom. I imagine that for those of you that are in school or, are required to take standardized tests, things like that, the protocol for stopping people from cheating and peeking at each other's tests would be vastly different. We would have to sit either very far away or completely separated, because if we could zoom, I think that we as humans will take advantage of that in whichever way that we can. And who knows, maybe we'll be able to zoom one day, maybe with some kind of special glasses we can put on where we can zoom and unzoom. Who knows what the future holds? But I think that chameleons having this natural ability is just seriously cool. Now, chameleons are loners. They're fairly solitary creatures. I don't like that word loner so much, but let's say that chameleons are solitary creatures. In fact, most of the time, females don't want males to even come near them. During the rare moments when the female is willing to be touched, the male will approach for mating. And as we learned before, the brighter colors will allow these male chameleons to have a higher chance to convince that female to mate than if they were those duller colors. Okay, so they like a lot of color. Chameleons eat insects and birds. I did not know they ate birds. I knew insects were definitely a part of it, but for them to be able to hunt, I guess, small birds is really cool. To catch their prey, they will creep very slowly along the branches, and once the prey is in reach, their suction cup of a tongue will shoot out and stick to the insect, or I suppose bird, maybe sometimes. Their tongues can be twice as long as their bodies when stretched out to catch prey, according to Encyclopedia Britannica. The insect is then drawn back into the lizard's mouth to be digested by its strong stomach acids. So if we compare this to human beings, our tongue is no way it's not even in the race for longest tongue if it comes to the chameleon, if we're comparing to the chameleon. Twice as long as their bodies. If we can try to imagine a human being having a tongue that is twice as long, so for those of you that are maybe, let's say, 5'5", okay, or let's just say 5 foot flat, that would mean that we would have a 10-foot long tongue, which would be, I imagine, very uncomfortable, but also very unsettling. So let's just be happy that we do not have tongues like that. Water is very important to chameleon growth and health, and they will either slurp water up using their tongues or in this sort of inhalation action with their mouth, which is very cool. So, of course, water being one of the essential building blocks to life here on Earth, water is essential in many different things, and almost all creatures are vastly dependent on this resource. Now, chameleons are different from many reptiles because some of the species, like for example, the Jackson's chameleon, will have live births. These species can give birth from 8 to 30 young at one time after a gestation of about 4 to 6 months, which is actually a very long time when it comes to the size of chameleons in general. Now, while the young are born live instead of just in an egg, they do start as an egg. These mothers incubate the eggs minus the shell inside of her body instead of laying them in a nest like the more common reptiles do. So other chameleon species lay eggs that have an incubation period of about 4 to 24 months depending on the species, according to the San Diego Zoo. And the size of the chameleon will predict about how many eggs she will lay. Small chameleon species lay 2 to 4 eggs, while some of these larger chameleons can lay 80 to 100 eggs at one time. So we can see that with these different species, that the size will play a key role in how many offspring it can produce. Now, no matter what species, chameleons will become mature from about 1 to 2 years of age. When we talk about mature, we are usually talking about sexual maturity in which they are able to have offspring of their own. The exception is going to be the chameleon from Madagascar, which it has been labeled as a vertebrate with the world's shortest lifespan. Their eggs will hatch in November. The young become adults, in January, and they will lay eggs in February. And then the entire adult population perishes after a lifespan of just 3 months. So that is super amazing that their life cycle is fairly short when we compare it to many other animals. You know, some insects, a lot of those smaller creatures can have a very short lifespan, which make them great for, I suppose, different kinds of research into, how they adapt to their environment, because you can see those different generations come quickly. But you don't really see it that often in reptiles or, even, I guess, small reptiles such as the chameleon. But that is just very cool. Now, I'm going to really quick take a drink of my tea. For those of you that are not already asleep or are just relaxing, whatever you're doing, I'm going to take a drink of my tea. If you have tea nearby, I urge you to join me. It's good to stay hydrated, right? Today, I am drinking somewhat of a pear tea, kind of a fruit tea, something I usually don't do. I usually prefer some of the more herbal stuff, but here I have a little bit of honey, a little bit of lemon. You just can't go wrong. Wow, that tea is so good. I can't believe I've outdone myself here, or whoever made this tea has outdone themselves. So let's move on. Enough about tea. This is an animal podcast. So their feet work like salad tongs, okay, which is a very interesting comparison. Most lizards have fairly unremarkable feet, right? Things that we, I guess, come to expect or aren't too surprising. In the majority of species, they will be comprised of 4 to 5 toes that can move independently of each other, just as ours do. But evolution has taken chameleon limbs in a completely different direction. A chameleon's foot will consist of 2 fleshy pads that oppose one another. One of these pads contains 3 digits that are fused together, while the other has 2 fused digits. Now, that can make it, I imagine that it would make it much easier for them to grasp onto branches, much easier to stick to wherever they're going, because they do spend a lot of their time in this kind of balancing act. Because up in the tree canopies where they live, it will act like a set of pincers almost. While most lizards have these sprawling limbs, chameleons usually hold their legs almost directly underneath their bodies, which will give them an athletic gait for a modern reptile. Walking this way will ensure that they keep their center of gravity directly above the feet, which will help them stay quite balanced. So here we see that maybe evolution or adaptation, or that even the chameleon has some sense of physics here, a natural instinct of how to stay balanced. So unlike many lizards, chameleons cannot regrow their tails. So most chameleons have these long, as we learned before, prehensile tails, which will act kind of as that 5th limb. In the majority of species, it can support the animal's entire body weight, which will allow a chameleon to move between branches more easily. But one thing that this appendage cannot do is regrow. So leopard geckos, anoles, and other lizards have this ability to just detach their tails and have it regrow. But if a chameleon's tail is severed, it will not grow a replacement. So there is somewhat similar, I guess, to humans, where we can't just regrow limbs, which would be amazing. Maybe in the future sometime, who knows? But right now, chameleons are in the same boat as we are, where they cannot have this magical regeneration of limbs like some of the other amazing creatures in the animal kingdom. You might ask yourself, how does a chameleon's tongue hold on to the insects and small vertebrates it touches? Well, their spit is about 400 times more viscous than that of a human being. Viscosity referring to sort of the thickness of it, okay? So 400 times more viscous, that is a lot of stickiness happening. So this ultra sticky substance coats the tongue and it will give the lizard an edge that helps them pull even heavy victims into their jaws. So that is really cool. I had that question before a long time ago, and I'm glad that it's being answered now. So this is something that I think is just really cool. So UV radiation has more energy than visible light that is detected by humans and can be even dangerous in large doses. One of the most mysterious things about chameleons is their ability to see light not only in the visible light spectrum, but in the UV ultraviolet spectrum. Presumably, this sort of sense, this ultraviolet sense, evolved to allow chameleons to better target their prey. And it may also have something to do with the fact that chameleons become more active, social, and interested in breeding when exposed to UV rays. And this could be because UV light stimulates the pineal glands in their brains. So that is just so cool. I can't believe how much the chameleon has to offer, and I, before starting this episode, mostly just thought that they were cool just because they could change color at, that they can quickly change color and camouflage into different things. Well, as we can see here, they have plenty more to offer than just that. So we're going to move on to the last fact of the show, which is the name. Where does the name chameleon come from? Well, chameleon means ground lion. So chameleons, like most animals, have been around a lot longer than humans, which explains why we find references to this reptile in the oldest available written resources. Okay, the Akkadians, which is an ancient culture that dominated modern-day Iraq about 4,000 years ago, called this lizard, here we go again with these names, the Nes Kakari, which means literally lion of the ground. And this usage was picked up unaltered by subsequent civilizations over the ensuing centuries. First the Greek Chameleon, then the Latin chameleon, and finally the modern English version chameleon, which means in the end ground lion. Now, I would have thought that their name would have something to do more with the changing of the colors that happens, but I guess not. I'm okay with ground lion too. I think that's a super cool name, and I give props to the chameleon, aka the ground lion. So that is the last fact of the episode. Thank you all so very much for listening. Again, thank you, Maddie, for providing this wonderful suggestion. Just so cool. I wish that I could just keep going, but regardless, what a fun episode. So if you want to have your animal on the podcast, if you want to hear about a specific animal that maybe you find interesting, you can go to Relax with Animal Facts on Instagram and send me a direct message, or you can send an email to relaxwithanimalfacts@gmail.com. Now, for those of you that want to have merch, there is a merch store. It's on relaxwithanimalfacts.com. You just click on store. I've been getting a tremendous amount of support from you guys through that store. So keep rocking the merch. It is very comfortable. From what I've heard, the blankets that we have, the pillows that we have are great. I personally wear the Relax with Animal Facts sweater around, and I gotta say, Teespring does a wonderful job of making some really comfortable clothing. And if you just want small stuff, maybe stickers for the kids, maybe, anything like that, we even sell kids' clothes, you can go to the relaxwithanimalfacts.com and click on store. So thank you all so much for your continued support. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I hope to see you on the next podcast episode with the next animal. Take care.